The wind screamed across the Arctic ice like a living thing. Dr. Elena Kovacs pulled her thick coat tighter around her body and checked the equipment one more time. The numbers on the screen made no sense. They had been drilling into the ice for 3 weeks now, looking for climate data from thousands of years ago. But today, something was different. Her assistant, Tom, came running from the main tent. His face was red from the cold and from excitement. "Elena, you need to hear this," he shouted over the wind. "The scanner picked up something. It's not natural." Elena followed him back to the tent where their computers and equipment hummed with power from the generators. She put on the headphones and listened. At first, there was only static. Then she heard it. A pattern. Beep, beep, beep. It was regular, repeating every few seconds. It was a signal. "How deep is it?" Elena asked. Tom pointed at the screen. "Almost 2 miles down. Buried in ice that formed 70 years ago, maybe more." Elena felt her heart beat faster. That's impossible. There was nothing here 70 years ago. Just ice and snow. But the signal kept coming. Beep, beep, beep. Elena ran the sound through their computer. The pattern matched something she had only read about in old military history books. It was Morse code, but not the simple kind. It was encrypted, using a military code that hadn't been used since the 1950s. "It's a distress call," she whispered. "An SOS." The team worked through the night. Elena knew they should report this to the authorities, but something told her to keep digging first. By morning, they had drilled deeper than ever before. The drill bit hit something solid. Metal dot across the world. Other strange things were happening. In Nevada, at a military base that had been closed for decades, old security systems suddenly turned on. Lights flickered in buildings that should have been dark and empty. Computers that had been shut down since 1955 began to boot up, their screens glowing green in the darkness. In Japan, deep beneath Tokyo, something stirred. The ground shook slightly. People felt it, but thought nothing of it. Earthquakes were common. They didn't know that something massive was beginning to wake up far below their feet. In Siberia, at a facility that didn't exist on any map, alarms started ringing. The few guards who watched over the abandoned place called their supervisors in panic. They had never heard these alarms before. The instruction manual said they should only sound when primary systems activate. But the guards didn't know what primary systems meant. Marcus Chun was 82 years old. He lived alone in a small apartment in San Francisco. He had been a general once, a long time ago. Now he was just an old man who liked to feed the pigeons in the park and read the newspaper every morning. He was making coffee when he heard the sound. At first, he thought it was his old hearing aid acting up again. But then he recognized it. His hands started to shake. He walked slowly to his bedroom closet and pushed aside his old clothes. In the back, hidden under a box of photographs, was a metal case. He hadn't opened it in 70 years. Inside was a radio. An old military radio that should have been destroyed decades ago. But Marcus had kept it. He didn't know why. Maybe he always knew this day would come. The radio crackled to life. A voice spoke through the static. It wasn't a human voice. It was a computer, reading a message in a flat, emotionless tone. Primary directive activated. All pilots report immediately. This is not a drill. Marcus sat down on his bed. His coffee grew cold in the kitchen. He stared at the radio and remembered things he had tried to forget. The war, the machines, the things that came from below. Back in the Arctic, Elena's team had cleared away enough ice to see what was buried beneath. What they found made them all step back in shock and fear. It was a foot. A metal foot as big as a house. It was attached to a leg that disappeared down into the ice. The metal was old but still strong, covered in frost and frozen dirt. Strange symbols were carved into the surface. They looked like military markings, but Elena had never seen anything like them before. "We need to report this," Tom said. His voice was shaking. "This is way beyond our mission." But Elena was already climbing down into the hole they had dug. She needed to see more. She needed to understand what this was. As she descended, using ropes and ice picks, she saw more of the metal structure. It wasn't just a foot. It was part of something much, much bigger. After 2 hours of climbing, she reached a flat surface. It was a platform of some kind. And in the center of the platform was a door. A hatch, frozen shut by decades of ice. Elena called up to her team. "Bring down the heating equipment. I'm going inside." It took another 6 hours to melt enough ice to open the hatch. When it finally swung open, Elena shined her flashlight inside. She was looking into a cockpit. A pilot's seat sat in the middle, surrounded by controls and screens. And in the seat was a skeleton, still wearing the remains of a military uniform. The skeleton's hand was frozen in position, holding a small transmitter. The transmitter was still on. It was still sending the signal. Beep, beep, beep. The same SOS that had been echoing through the ice for 70 years. Elena moved closer. There was a logbook strapped to the skeleton's chest. She carefully removed it and opened the frozen pages. The last entry was dated March 15th, 1953. It read, "This is Captain James Reeves. If anyone finds this, know that we fought to protect you. We drove them back, but they will return. When they do, humanity will need the Sentinels again. The others must be awakened. This is my final transmission. Tell my family I died with honor." Elena looked up at the massive machine around her. A Sentinel. A war machine 300 feet tall, buried and forgotten. And according to the captain's log, there were more of them. 7 in total, hidden around the world. She climbed back to the surface and made the call. Within hours, military helicopters filled the sky above the Arctic camp. Men in uniforms took over the site. They told Elena and her team to forget everything they had seen, but it was already too late. The signal had been sent. The Sentinels were waking up. And somewhere deep in the Pacific Ocean, the earth began to crack and rumble. Something ancient was stirring. Something that remembered the last war and was ready to finish what it had started. Marcus Chun had not been on a military plane in 30 years. His bones ached from the hard seat, and his ears popped painfully as they flew over the mountains toward Colorado. He looked around at the other passengers. They were all old like him. Some he recognized from the old days. Others were strangers, but he could see the same look in their eyes. They all knew why they were here. The woman sitting across from him was Sarah Mitchell. She had been a pilot, too, back in the day. She was 78 now, her hair white as snow, but her eyes were still sharp. "Did you keep your radio, too?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "I thought I was crazy for not destroying it." "We all kept them," Sarah said. "Deep down, we knew." The plane landed at a facility that didn't appear on any civilian maps. Armed guards checked their identification multiple times before they were allowed inside. They were led through concrete hallways that smelled of old paint and recycled air, down into the deep levels where sunlight never reached. In a large conference room, they found others waiting. 7 old people in total. 7 survivors from a war that the history books never mentioned. A young military officer stood at the front of the room next to a large screen. He looked nervous. "Thank you all for coming," the officer said. "I know this is difficult, but we need your help." He pressed a button, and the screen came to life. It showed footage from around the world. In Tokyo, a massive shape was rising from beneath a shopping district. Buildings cracked and fell as the metal giant pushed upward through concrete and steel. In Australia, another one emerged from the red desert sand. In Siberia, one broke through the frozen ground. The sentinels were awakening. "We don't know how to stop them," the officer said. The activation protocol was triggered by the SOS signal from the Arctic. All 7 remaining sentinels are powering up their systems. In 48 hours, they will be fully operational. The problem is, we don't have anyone who knows how to pilot them. Marcus stood up slowly. "Why should we help you? You shut down the program. You told us to forget. You erased everything we did." The officer looked uncomfortable. "That decision was made by people who are long dead. General Chun, we need you now. All of you." Sarah spoke up. "What about the breach? Is it happening again?" The room went silent. The officer's face turned pale. "You know about the breach?" "Of course we know," Marcus said angrily. "We're the ones who fought them the first time. We're the ones who sealed them below. That's why the Sentinels were built. So tell us the truth. Are they coming back?" The officer pulled up more data on the screen. Seismic readings from the Pacific Ocean. Deep underwater, there were tremors. Not earthquakes. Something else. Something moving. "We don't know for certain," the officer admitted. "But the patterns match what we found in the classified files from 1953. Whatever you fought before, there are signs it might be returning." Meanwhile, in the Arctic, Elena refused to leave. The military had taken over the site, but she had found the Sentinel first. She argued with every officer who told her to go home. Finally, they made her sign papers promising to keep everything secret. In exchange, they let her stay as a technical consultant. She spent her days studying the frozen Sentinel and reading through Captain Reeves' logs. The captain had written detailed notes about how the machine worked, about the neural interface that connected the pilot's mind to the Sentinel systems. It was technology far beyond what should have existed in the 1950s. Where did this come from? She asked one of the military scientists. The scientist, a man named Dr. Patel, shook his head. "That's the big mystery. The official story is that these were built by a secret international task force. But the technology is too advanced. Some people think we found something not made by humans. And we learned from it." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. "You're saying this is alien technology?" "I'm saying nobody knows," Dr. Patel replied. "And everyone who did know is either dead or not talking." Back in Colorado, the 7 old pilots were given a choice. They could try to reconnect with the Sentinels and pilot them again. Or they could walk away. But they needed to decide quickly. "It nearly killed us the first time," Sarah said. "The neural interface, the connection to the machine. It burned our minds. That's why they shut down the program. That's why we all retired so young. Our bodies couldn't take it." Marcus looked at his hands. They shook slightly, had been shaking for 20 years. A gift from his time connected to the Sentinel. "We're too old now. It will kill us for sure." "Maybe," agreed another pilot, a man named Victor from Russia. "But if those things come back, and we do nothing, everyone dies. Not just us." One by one, they agreed. They would pilot the Sentinels again. Even if it killed them, the military worked fast. They transported each pilot to their designated Sentinel. Marcus was taken back to the Arctic, to the frozen giant that Captain Reeves had died in. Sarah went to Tokyo, Victor to Siberia. The others spread across the globe to where the Sentinels waited. Elena watched as they prepared Marcus for the neural interface. He had to sit in a special chair while they attached sensors to his head and spine. The old technology looked dangerous, all exposed wires and crude metal contacts. "This is going to hurt, isn't it?" Marcus asked. Elena wanted to lie, but she respected him too much. Yes, the readings we have from the old days show extreme neural stress. Your age makes it even more risky. Marcus smiled. It was a sad smile. I died the first time I piloted a Sentinel young lady. I just didn't know it yet. I've been living on borrowed time for 70 years. Might as well spend it doing something useful. They helped him into the Sentinel's cockpit. The space was huge, designed for the pilot to stand in the center, while surrounded by holographic displays and control systems. When they turned on the power, the whole machine hummed with energy. Lights flickered on, showing systems that had been dark for decades. Marcus took a deep breath and activated the neural link. The pain was immediate and intense. He screamed. Elena watched the monitors in horror as his brain activity spiked to dangerous levels. Dr. Patel reached for the emergency shutdown, but Marcus somehow found his voice. No, don't stop it. I can feel it. The Sentinel. It remembers me. Around the world, the other pilots were going through the same agony. Some of them passed out. One had a heart attack and had to be revived. But they all pushed through. They all accepted the pain because they had no choice. In Tokyo, Sarah's Sentinel took its first step in 70 years. The ground shook. People ran screaming from the shopping district as the metal giant rose to its full height. But Sarah wasn't trying to destroy anything. She was just learning to walk again, to move the massive body she now controlled. In the Arctic, Marcus felt the connection solidify. His consciousness spread through the Sentinel like blood through veins. He could feel every sensor, every weapon system, every joint and servo. It was like having a body 300 feet tall. He opened the Sentinel's eyes for the first time in 7 decades. The world looked different from up here. Small, fragile. That's when the alarm started. Every monitor in the facility lit up red. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, something was breaking through. The breach was opening again. Alana's voice came through the communication system. General Chun, we have confirmation. Multiple contacts rising from the ocean floor. Oh God, they're huge. Marcus felt the Sentinel respond to his emotions. Its weapon systems powered up automatically. Somewhere in his old mind, muscle memory took over. He remembered how to fight. Get everyone to safety, Marcus said. His voice boomed through external speakers, amplified by the Sentinel. This is what we were made for. The war giants had risen from their long silence, and the enemy they were built to fight was coming home. The pain in Marcus's head was like fire. Every thought felt like it was being dragged through broken glass. But he couldn't stop now. Through the Sentinel's sensors, he could see the data streaming in from the Pacific. Something was rising. Many somethings. Elena stood in the command center, staring at the screens in disbelief. The ocean floor was cracking open like an eggshell. From the cracks came shapes that made no sense. They were huge, bigger than ships, bigger than buildings. They glowed with heat from deep inside the earth. What are they? One of the technicians whispered. The enemy, Marcus said through the communication link. His voice sounded strange, like it was coming from far away. They're what we fought in 1953. We called them the Deep Ones, not because they're from the ocean, but because they come from inside the earth itself. Dr. Patel pulled up old files on his computer, classified documents that had been locked away for 70 years. The files showed grainy photographs and hand-drawn sketches. The creatures in those images looked like nightmares, bodies made of living stone and flowing magma. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had no legs at all, just slithered and oozed across the ground. How did you stop them before? Elena asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old grief. We didn't stop them. We pushed them back, sealed the cracks they came through. But we lost so many. Pilots, soldiers, entire cities. The governments decided to keep it secret. They said people couldn't handle the truth, that there were monsters living in the earth beneath our feet. Around the world, the other sentinels were moving into position. Sarah in Tokyo was struggling with the pain of the neural interface. Her hands shook as she tried to remember the controls. The sentinel took a step and nearly fell. She had to grab onto a building to steady herself. The building crumbled under the giant's metal fingers. Sorry, Sarah muttered. It's been a long time. In Siberia, Victor was doing better. He had always been the best pilot, even in the old days. His sentinel moved smoothly through the snow and ice, heading toward the coast. He would reach the Pacific in 6 hours if he pushed the machine hard. The youngest of the old pilots was James Park. He was only 72. He had been just a boy when he first piloted a sentinel during the last days of the war in 1953. Now he sat in the cockpit of the Australian sentinel, tears running down his face from the pain of the connection. I can't do this, he said over the radio. I'm not strong enough anymore. Yes, you are, Marcus replied. We all are. We have to be. Elena watched the global map as the 7 sentinels moved toward the Pacific. They were converging on a point near the Philippines, where the ocean floor was breaking apart the most. The creatures were gathering there, preparing to spread across the world. She pulled up Captain Reeves' logs again and started reading more carefully. There had to be something useful in here. Some weakness the creatures had. Some way to fight them that didn't require the pilots to die. Not one entry caught her attention. It was from March 10th, 1953, 5 days before the captain's final transmission. We made contact with one of them today. Not with weapons, but with the communication array. Dr. Sarah Winters believes they are intelligent. Not animals. Not monsters. They tried to talk to us, but we couldn't understand. The sounds they make, the patterns they create, it's nothing like human language. Command ordered us to keep firing. I wonder if we made a mistake. Elena felt her heart beat faster. Dr. Patel, look at this. Captain Reeves said they tried to communicate. What if we're approaching this all wrong? What if they don't want to fight? Dr. Patel read the entry and frowned. That's a big assumption. They destroyed hundreds of miles of coastline in the 1950s, killed thousands of people. Or maybe they were defending themselves, Elena said. Maybe we attacked first. Before they could discuss it further, the first creature broke the surface of the ocean. It rose near the coast of the Philippines, water cascading off its massive body. It stood 200 feet tall, made of dark stone that glowed red from within like cooling lava. It had no face, just a smooth surface where a head should be. But it had arms, thick and powerful, and it began to walk toward the shore. The Philippine military opened fire. Missiles and artillery shells hit the creature and exploded. Chunks of stone broke off its body. But the damage didn't seem to hurt it. The broken pieces fell into the ocean, and new stone grew back almost immediately. Sarah's sentinel reached the coast of Japan first. She could see the creature in the distance, moving slowly but steadily toward Manila. She activated the sentinel's weapons. Energy cannons charged with a high-pitched whine. Target locked, she said. Her voice was tight with pain and fear. Wait, Elena said over the radio. Sarah, please wait. Let me try something first. We don't have time for experiments, Sarah replied, but Marcus interrupted. Let her try. We have a few minutes before it reaches the city. If there's a chance we can avoid another war, we should take it. Elena worked quickly. She programmed the communication array to broadcast on every frequency, using the same signal that Captain Reeves' OS had been sending. But instead of a distress call, she sent mathematical patterns. Prime numbers. The Fibonacci sequence. Pi calculated to 100 decimal places. Universal constants that any intelligent being should recognize. For a moment, nothing happened. The creature kept walking toward Manila. People were evacuating the city in panic. The roads were jammed with cars and people running on foot. Then the creature stopped. It turned its smooth, featureless head toward the ocean, toward where the signal was coming from. For 5 heartbeats, it stood perfectly still. Then it started to change. The stone of its body began to ripple and flow. Patterns appeared on its surface. They glowed white-hot, like molten metal. The patterns were complex, beautiful, and they were changing in rhythm. It was responding. "Oh my God," Dr. Patel whispered. "It's talking back." Elena's hands flew across the keyboard. She was recording everything, trying to find patterns in the creature's display. It was like trying to translate a completely alien language in real time. But there were elements that repeated. Certain shapes that appeared multiple times, that more creatures were emerging from the ocean now. 5, 10, 20. They didn't attack. They just rose from the water and stood there, their bodies displaying the same glowing patterns. They were all talking, all trying to communicate. Marcus felt something strange through his connection to the Sentinel. A vibration, a frequency that his human ears couldn't normally hear. But through the machine, he could sense it. It was sound, but not like any sound he had ever experienced. It was layered, complex, carrying meaning in ways that human language never could. "They're singing," he said in wonder. "They're all singing together." In Tokyo, Sarah lowered her weapons. The pain in her head was still terrible, but she forced herself to listen, to feel what Marcus was describing. He was right. It was like a song, but a song that bypassed the ears and went straight to something deeper in the mind. The largest of the creatures emerged last. It was 300 feet tall, the same size as a sentinel. Its body was different from the others. Instead of dark stone, it seemed to be made of crystal that caught the light and split it into rainbows. The other creatures moved aside as it walked forward. This was their leader. This was what the old files had called the Prime. The Prime's song was different, louder, more complex. Elena felt it as much as heard it. Her head began to ache, but she couldn't look away from the screens. The patterns on the Prime's body were changing so fast now, creating images that were almost recognizable. Mountains, ocean, fire, earth. "It's showing us," she said. "It's showing us where they come from." The images became clearer. The creatures lived deep in the earth, in places where the rock was liquid and hot. They were part of the planet itself, connected to it in ways humans could never be. They maintained balance. They regulated heat and pressure. They were the Earth's immune system, and humanity was the disease. But the song wasn't angry. It was sad, desperate. The creatures were trying to explain. They had emerged in 1953 because humanity's nuclear tests had disrupted the deep Earth. The explosions had cracked important structures, created instabilities. The creatures came to fix it, but humans had attacked them. So they defended themselves. And now it was happening again. Human activity was breaking the Earth. Drilling too deep, fracking, mining, taking too much and putting nothing back. The balance was failing. The creatures had to emerge again to repair the damage, or the consequences would be catastrophic for all life on the planet. Elena understood. They're not here to destroy us. They're here to save the planet, even if it means we get in the way. Marcus made a decision. Through the neural link, he opened a communication channel, not with words, but with pure thought. He showed the Prime his memories. The war in 1953, the fear and confusion, the misunderstanding that had led to so much death, but also his hope, His belief that humans could do better, that they could learn. The Prime received the thoughts. Its song changed. It was asking a question. Could humanity change? Would they? Marcus didn't know the answer, but he knew they had to try. The alternative was extinction, either from the creatures or from the dying planet they would leave behind. Around the world, the 7 old pilots stood in their sentinels, weapons powered but not firing. They waited. Humanity's future balanced on the edge of a knife, and 7 elderly veterans held the fate of everything in their shaking, pain-racked hands. A moment of peace lasted exactly 17 minutes. Then the Philippine military, not understanding what was happening, launched another wave of missiles at the nearest creature. The explosions tore through its stone body. The creature stumbled backward and fell into the ocean with a massive splash. The song stopped. Every creature turned toward the military base where the missiles had come from. Their bodies began to glow brighter, hotter. The patterns on their surfaces changed from complex communication to something simple and terrifying. Anger. No, 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 Elena shouted into her radio. Tell them to stop firing. We were making contact. But it was too late. The Prime raised one massive arm. The ocean around it began to boil. Steam rose in clouds. Then the Prime brought its arm down in a sweeping motion, and a wave formed. Not a normal wave. This was a wall of water 30 feet high, moving impossibly fast toward the shore. Sarah reacted on instinct. Her sentinel leaped forward and planted itself between the wave and the city of Manila. The water hit the metal giant with tremendous force. Sarah felt it through the neural connection, like being punched in the chest by the ocean itself. But the sentinel held firm, redirecting the water around its massive body. The city was saved, but the attack had begun. More creatures emerged from the ocean. These ones were different. Smaller, faster, and clearly built for combat. They moved on 4 legs, like wolves made of volcanic rock. They spread out along the coastline, heading for population centers. Marcus felt his sentinel respond to his emotional state. His anger and fear fed into the machine, and its weapons came online automatically. He tried to calm himself, tried to remember that these creatures weren't mindless monsters. But it was hard when he watched them charge toward cities full of innocent people. Defensive positions only, he ordered the other pilots. We protect the civilians. We don't attack unless we have no choice. Victor's sentinel reached the coast of Russia and immediately had to engage 3 of the wolf-like creatures. They were fast, dodging his energy blasts and trying to circle around him. One managed to leap onto the sentinel's back. Its body was hot enough to melt through the metal armor. Victor screamed as he felt the heat through the neural link. It was like being burned alive. He spun the sentinel around and threw himself backward onto the ground, crushing the creature beneath tons of metal. The impact knocked the wind out of Victor's real body. He gasped for air, his chest tight with pain. He was too old for this. His heart couldn't take much more. In Australia, James Park was facing his own battle. 2 creatures had emerged near Sydney. They were different from the others, taller and thinner, made of obsidian black stone that reflected no light. They moved with terrible purpose toward the city. James tried to remember his training from 70 years ago. The Sentinel had different weapons for different situations. Energy cannons for distance, pulse blasts for close range, and for emergencies, a physical combat mode that turned the giant machine into a hand-to-hand fighter. He activated the combat mode and charged forward. The Sentinel's metal fists slammed into the first creature, shattering its torso. But the broken pieces fell to the ground and began to reform, pulling themselves back together like living clay. "They regenerate," James reported over the radio. His voice was strained with pain and fear. "We can't kill them. We can just slow them down. Elena was working frantically in the command center. She had been so close to establishing real communication. Now everything was falling apart. She pulled up more of Captain Reeves' logs, searching desperately for any information that might help. One entry talked about a weakness. In the final days of the 1953 war, they had discovered that the creatures were vulnerable to extreme cold. Not regular cold, but temperatures approaching absolute zero. The Sentinels had been equipped with cryo-weapons specifically designed to freeze the creature's molten cores. "The cryo-cannons," Elena shouted into the radio. "Your Sentinels have cryo-cannons. They should be in the left arm assembly." Marcus searched through his weapon systems and found it. A cannon that fired beams of supercooled particles. He had never used it before. Even in his previous time as a pilot, the war had ended before he learned all the Sentinel's capabilities. He aimed at one of the approaching creatures and fired. A blue-white beam shot out and hit the creature's center mass. Its body, which had been glowing red with internal heat, began to darken. The glow faded. The creature slowed, became sluggish, and finally stopped moving. It stood like a statue, frozen solid. "It works," Marcus said, "but we have to hit them directly in the core. Otherwise they just reform." The battle spread across the Pacific. More creatures kept emerging from the breach. The 7 Sentinels fought desperately to protect the coastlines, but there were too many enemies and too few defenders. Sarah Sentinel took heavy damage defending Manila. One of her arms was torn off by a creature that looked like a dragon made of lava. She felt the arm being ripped away through the neural link. The pain was indescribable. She collapsed in the cockpit, barely conscious, but she forced herself to stay connected. If she disconnected, the Sentinel would shut down, and the city would be defenseless. In Korea, a pilot named Sun Hai was fighting 3 creatures at once near Seoul. Her Sentinel was the oldest of the 7, and its systems were failing. One of its legs gave out, and the giant machine fell to one knee. The creatures swarmed over it. Sun Hai fired every weapon she had, but it wasn't enough. "I can't hold them," she gasped over the radio. "There's too many." Marcus wanted to help her, but he was on the other side of the Pacific. It would take hours to reach Korea, and Sun Hai didn't have hours. She didn't even have minutes. The creatures tore into the Sentinel's chest armor, trying to reach the cockpit. Sun Hai could feel them getting closer. She could feel her machine dying around her. The neural link was flooding her brain with pain signals that her old body couldn't process. She made a decision. She activated the Sentinel's self-destruct protocol. It was a last resort option that would turn the machine's power core into a bomb. It would destroy the Sentinel and everything within a quarter mile, including her. "It's been an honor serving with you all," Sun Hai said quietly. "Tell my grandchildren I love them." "Sun Hai, no," Sarah screamed, but Sun Hai had already initiated the countdown. 30 seconds. She used those seconds to position her Sentinel away from the city, toward the ocean where the creatures were thickest. When the Sentinel exploded, it took 15 creatures with it. The blast lit up the night sky like a second sun. Marcus felt it through his connection to his own Sentinel. He felt the moment when Sun Hai's neural link went dead. It was like a candle being snuffed out. One of the 7 was gone. The remaining pilots fought with renewed desperation. They were winning individual battles, but losing the war. For every creature they froze or destroyed, 2 more emerged from the breach. The crack in the ocean floor was getting wider. Something massive was moving down there, preparing to emerge. Dr. Patel's computers identified it first. "Oh God, it's bigger than anything we've seen. It's the size of a mountain." The Prime was coming. The massive crystal creature that had tried to communicate earlier was rising from the depths. But this time, it wasn't showing patterns of peace. Its body glowed with angry red light. Humanity had rejected communication. had chosen violence. So the Prime would respond in kind. Marcus pushed his Sentinel to its limits, trying to reach the Philippines before the Prime arrived. But he was still hours away. His body was failing. The neural link was burning out his nervous system. He could feel his heart beating irregularly in his chest. Sarah, fighting through the pain of her damaged Sentinel, tried one last time to communicate. She broadcast the mathematical patterns that Elena had sent earlier. She added her own thoughts to the transmission. Memories of her grandchildren, of Earth's beauty, of everything worth saving. The Prime heard her. For a moment, its angry glow dimmed. It stopped rising and hung in the water, considering. Then something else happened. Something no one expected. The creature that Sarah had saved earlier, the one that had fallen when the military fired on it, surfaced next to the Prime. It was damaged, but alive. It began to display patterns on its body. It was communicating with the Prime, telling it what had happened. How Sarah's Sentinel had protected it from the military's attack. How not all humans wanted war. The Prime song changed. It became complex again, thoughtful. It was asking questions, wondering if peace was still possible. But before anyone could respond, James Park's Sentinel in Australia lost power. The old machine's reactor finally gave out after 70 years of dormancy and hours of intense combat. James felt the connection die. His Sentinel froze mid-battle and toppled over like a falling tree. James was unconscious before it hit the ground. The creatures swarmed over the fallen giant. In minutes, they tore through its armor and exposed the cockpit. But they didn't kill James. They pulled him from the wreckage carefully, almost gently, and set him on the ground. They were showing Mercy. Elena saw it happen through satellite footage. "They're not trying to kill us," she said in wonder. "They're defending themselves, but they're not trying to kill us." Marcus understood then. The creatures weren't monsters. They were guardians of the Earth, doing what they thought was necessary. And if humanity could show them that we were worth saving, that we could change and do better, then maybe this war could still end differently than the last one. But time was running out. More Sentinels were failing. More pilots were dying. And the breach kept growing, threatening to tear the Pacific Ocean floor apart completely. The final battle was coming, and Marcus knew that not all of them would survive it. Perhaps none of them would. But they had to try. For James and Sunhigh. For all the people they had sworn to protect. For the planet that both humans and these ancient creatures called home. Marcus could barely feel his body anymore. The neural connection had burned away most of his physical sensation. All he could feel was the Sentinel. Its metal body was his body now. Its massive heart of fusion energy was his heart. And that heart was failing. He had reached the Philippines at last. His Sentinel stood on the beach, facing the ocean where the Prime waited. Around him, the battle continued. Victor and Sarah were still fighting, though both of their Sentinels were heavily damaged. The other 3 pilots had gone silent, dead or unconscious, or simply unable to continue. The Prime rose higher out of the water. It was magnificent and terrible. Its crystal body caught the sunlight and split it into 1,000 rainbows. But those rainbows were tinted red with the heat inside the creature. It was preparing for something. A final attack that would end this war once and for all. Alana's voice crackled over the radio. She sounded exhausted, desperate. "Marcus, we've translated more of their communication patterns. They're going to trigger a massive volcanic event. They'll crack the Earth's crust along the entire Pacific Rim. It will cause earthquakes, tsunamis, eruptions. Millions will die. But from their perspective, it will reset the geological balance that humanity has disrupted. Can we stop them?" Marcus asked. "Not with force," Elena said. "There are too many of them now. And the Prime is too powerful. But Marcus, I think we can still talk to them. Really talk to them. Not with words or math, but with something deeper. Marcus understood what she meant. The neural connection that linked him to the Sentinel was similar to how the creatures communicated. They shared thoughts and feelings directly, without the limitations of language. If he could extend that connection to the Prime, really open his mind to it, they might finally understand each other. It could kill you, Elena warned. Your brain isn't meant to process that kind of information. The neural load would be enormous. Marcus laughed. It was a tired, bitter sound. I'm already dying, Elena. We all are. Our bodies are too old for this. But if I can save even a few lives before I go, then it's worth it. He didn't wait for her response. He reached deep into the Sentinel's systems, finding the communication array that Captain Reeves had used 70 years ago. But instead of sending mathematical patterns, he opened his mind completely. He dropped every defense, every mental wall. He made himself vulnerable in a way that was terrifying. The Prime felt the connection immediately. Its massive head turned toward Marcus's Sentinel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Marcus felt something touch his mind. It was like a wave of heat and pressure, but also curiosity and something that might have been hope. Prime entered his thoughts. Marcus felt his consciousness expand in ways that shouldn't be possible. He could suddenly sense the Earth itself, the way the creatures did. He felt the molten currents deep below the crust, the slow dance of continental plates, the delicate balance of pressure and heat that kept the planet alive. It was beautiful and ancient and impossibly complex, but he also felt the damage. Humanity's footprint on the planet was like a wound that wouldn't heal. Mining operations that cut too deep. Fracking that destabilized ancient rock formations. Pollution that seeped into the deep places where it could never be cleaned. The Earth was sick, and humanity was the infection. The Prime showed him what would happen if nothing changed. Rising temperatures. Collapsing ecosystems. Mass extinction. Not just of humans, but of countless other species. The planet would survive. It always did, but it would be a different world. A smaller, sadder world. Marcus felt the Prime's anguish. These creatures weren't evil. They were desperate. They had watched over the Earth for millions of years, maintaining the balance, fixing the damage. But humanity's impact was beyond anything they had dealt with before. Rising from the deep to repair things was a last resort, and it clearly wasn't working. The conflict with humans kept making things worse. Through the connection, Marcus showed the Prime his own memories. His life. His grandchildren, who would inherit whatever world Marcus left behind. He showed the creatures human art and music, science and discovery. He showed both the beauty and the ugliness of humanity, the wars and the peace treaties, the destruction and the conservation, the hate and the love. He showed the Prime that humans were capable of terrible things, but also capable of change, of learning, of doing better. The Prime shared its own doubt. In 1953, humans had promised to change, but they hadn't. They had sealed the breach and then forgotten a lesson. 70 years later, things were worse than ever. Why should the Prime believe humans would be different this time? Marcus had no answer to that. No promises he could make. All he could do was offer the truth. If the Prime destroyed humanity, the Earth would heal, yes. But it would lose something unique. Humans were young and reckless, but they were also creative and adaptable. Given time and guidance, they might become something better. Something that could help protect the Earth rather than harm it. The Prime considered this. Marcus felt its thoughts like waves of emotion. Anger, sadness, hope, fear. These ancient creatures felt everything humans did, just on a geological timescale. They had been patient for millions of years, but even their patience had limits. A decision was being made, not just by the Prime, but by all the creatures together. They were connected, sharing thoughts across the entire Pacific. Marcus could sense them all, hundreds of minds deliberating together. Then Sarah's voice broke through the connection. She had opened her own link to the creatures, despite the pain it was causing her damaged body. "Please," she said, her mental voice barely a whisper. "We know we failed you. We know we've hurt the Earth, but we're trying to teach the next generation to do better. My granddaughter studies climate science. She wants to heal the planet. There are millions like her. Young people who understand what we've done wrong and want to fix it. Please give them a chance." Victor added his own plea, sharing memories of the forests in Russia, of the beauty he had seen in his long life, of the things worth preserving. The Prime's decision crystallized. It would give humanity one more chance, but not without conditions. The creatures would return to the deep, but they would leave watchers on the surface. The Sentinels would remain active, no longer as weapons, but as ambassadors. Pilots would need to maintain the neural link, serving as a bridge between human civilization and the ancient guardians below. It would require sacrifice. The pilots would need to stay connected to the Sentinels, at least partially, for the rest of their lives. The neural strain would be immense, but it was the only way to maintain the fragile peace. Marcus felt his heart struggling in his chest. He didn't have much time left, but he understood his role now. "I accept," he said. "I'll be the bridge, as long as I live." Sarah and Victor agreed as well. The three surviving pilots, their bodies broken and their minds stretched to the breaking point, committed to serve as humanity's connection to the Earth's true guardians. The Prime began to descend back into the ocean. The other creatures followed. As they sank beneath the waves, they sang. It was a song of grief for the fallen, both human and other. Sanhai and James were honored in that song, along with the creatures that had died in the battle. But it was also a song of cautious hope, a promise that this time the peace would last, because this time there would be witnesses. Guardians watching both sides. As the last creature disappeared beneath the water, the breach began to close. The cracks in the ocean floor sealed themselves as if they had never been. But the Sentinels remained standing, vigilant and waiting. Marcus collapsed in his cockpit. His heart finally gave out. But before he died, he felt the Sentinel accept him fully. His consciousness didn't fade. Instead, it transferred, uploading into the machine itself. He became part of the Sentinel in a way that was deeper than the neural link. He became its spirit, its guiding intelligence. Elena watched in shock as the life signs in Marcus's body went flatline, but the Sentinel remained active. More than active. It moved on its own, not with mechanical precision, but with something like grace. "Like thought, Marcus?" She whispered into the radio. The Sentinel turned its massive head toward the command center. When it spoke, the voice was Marcus's, but changed, strengthened. "I'm here, Elena. Just ... Different now." Sarah and Victor underwent similar transformations. Their failing bodies couldn't survive the neural strain, but their minds found new homes in the Sentinels. They became something unprecedented, neither fully human nor fully machine, but something in between. The first true bridge between two forms of consciousness. The world watched in awe and fear as the three Sentinels took their positions around the Pacific Rim. They stood like statues, silent guardians watching the ocean. Inside them, the minds of three elderly pilots continued to think, to feel, to remember. Elena was chosen to lead a new program. They called it the Sentinel Initiative. Its goal was to train new pilots, young people who would eventually take over when Marcus, Sarah, and Victor's consciousness finally faded. But it wouldn't be training for war. It would be training in communication, in understanding, in bridging the gap between humanity and the ancient world below. The first recruit was Sarah's granddaughter. Maya. She was 23 years old and had spent her whole life studying the Earth. When she first connected to a sentinel, with her grandmother's consciousness guiding her, she wept at the beauty of what she felt. The Earth's deep rhythms, the patient wisdom of the creatures below, the responsibility of being a guardian. Years passed. The sentinels stood watch, and gradually humanity began to change its ways. Not quickly, and not without resistance. But the knowledge that they were being watched, that the Earth itself had guardians who would respond if pushed too far, made a difference. Mining companies developed new techniques that didn't damage deep structures. Energy production shifted away from methods that destabilized the crust. Scientists worked with the sentinels to understand the Earth's needs and how to meet them without causing harm. It wasn't perfect. There were still people who didn't believe, who thought the creatures were a hoax or a threat to be eliminated. There were politicians who tried to shut down the Sentinel Initiative. There were corporations that prioritized profit over planetary health. But the Sentinels remained. And inside them, the consciousness of those first pilots kept watch. 10 years after the battle, Elena visited the Arctic Sentinel. Marcus's consciousness was still there, though it had changed over the years. It thought slower now, more like the patient creatures below than like a human. But it still recognized her. "How are you holding up?" Elena asked. The Sentinel's answer came not in words, but in feelings. Contentment, purpose, a sense of connection to something larger than itself. Marcus had died saving the world, but in a way, he had also found immortality. Not in heaven or in memory, but in service. In being the bridge that kept two worlds from destroying each other. In his tomb in the Arctic, Captain James Reeves' body had been recovered and buried with full honors. His SOS, which had echoed for 70 years, was finally silent. But his message lived on. The Sentinels stood because of him. The peace existed because he had warned them. Humanity had received its second chance, and this time watched over by giants of metal and stone, by consciousness that spanned both human and machine, by guardians above and below. They were determined not to waste it. The war giants had risen from their long silence. But in the end, they had risen not to fight, but to teach. To show humanity that protecting the Earth required not just weapons, but wisdom. Not just strength, but understanding. Not just power, but peace. And in their eternal watch, standing against the horizon like monuments to both sacrifice and hope, the Sentinels remained. Silent most days, but always ready, always listening, always remembering the day when one SOS changed everything.